Hello everybody, I am over in Morningside Nature Park over in a Sandhill forest community, which I used to think was probably one of the most boring places or ecosystems in Florida outside of a sand dune or scrub ecosystem, but I've learned from this class that Sandhill ecosystems are pretty diverse, so here I am and just want to talk about it. Fire has been talked a lot about in this class, and fire is a key component in keeping a sandhill ecosystem in its most natural state. Wildfires used to be prominent in Florida, especially during the spring and summer months, whenever lightning storms happened all the time. And since urbanization has occurred and we've been able to get rid of wildfires pretty quickly, the pine trees in sandhill ecosystems have dwindled drastically. Just to give you information about that, there used to be 90 million acres of these sandhill ecosystems in Florida, and now we're down to roughly about 4 million, so that's a lot gone. If you look at the soil composition of this area, it's going to just be sand, and resembling beach sand pretty much, like just taking an auger down a few feet, it's just going to be pure sand. That's about it. And that occurred because this used to be sand dunes when water levels were higher, and this would have been considered part of Florida's coastline at one point. Let's see, this is also a drier area, so a lot of these plant species in here are going to be water tolerant and heat tolerant. Going back to fire, fire is most effective when it happens in April to July. It's very crucial for pine trees to reproduce and other plants, and also suppresses a lot of the understory, getting rid of some of the small trees that would overtake the pine trees and kill off some of the wiregrass and organic material. Currently where I'm standing, you see tons of pine trees. This is a longleaf pine, and one of the distinguishing factors between a longleaf pine and a slash pine is that if you grab some pine needles on the ground, longleaf pine, there's going to be bundles of 3 instead of, I don't know if you can see that too well, but it'll be bundles of 3, and slash pine is going to be bundles of 2. Pine trees were pretty popular back then because it was used for power poles today, even masts of ships back when most ships were made out of wood. It was also used for plywood and saw timber. Looking down on the ground, we have tons of wiregrass everywhere, and this is kind of thick with wiregrass that hasn't been burned in a while. But this is a good fire promoter, and it just helps the fire just spread rapidly through these areas. Looking over here, we have a sand live oak, and some of the economic value for a sand live oak. Actually, there is no economic value for sand live oak. If they were allowed to get bigger, they're very twisty and they're not a very straight tree, but it's a very durable wood, so you could always use it for firewood. Over here, you see we have a small turkey oak, and when they were allowed to get bigger, you could use that for either firewood, pulpwood, biomass, and back in the day, it was sometimes used for barbecue. So I don't know if that changes the flavor at all, but there you go. That's what it's used for. And right here, this looks like a blue jack oak, and you can tell because it has the long, slender leaves, but it's not curled so much like the sand live oaks. And if those were allowed to get bigger, for the economic value, those were good for railroad ties and also firewood. I guess most of this wood is probably good for firewood. Let's see, looking around, trying to find some other trees really quick. Oh, bracken fern, can't forget about that one. This one's a dead one. I don't see too many live ones in this area, but bracken fern is just kind of more of like an ornamental kind of plant. If you can see down in this area, this looks like gopher apple, and those are pretty popular for gophers, other crawling wildlife, insects, all that good stuff. I was trying to find a cactus somewhere, but I didn't find one here. Oh, and right next to this one, I'll walk over towards it. It's a saw palmetto, and if fire was not hindering this at all, this could be about 10 feet high. I have some of these at my house back in Umatilla, and this is different from a sable palm because if you look closely down in this area right there, the stem doesn't curl up into the leaf, and that's the big distinguishing factor there. Anyway, so those are some of the plants in this area. There's a few others I didn't mention, but those are some of the highlights. Thank you.